Smiling April, 2001. Two 16-year-old boys walking through woods near Radnor, Pennsylvania, looking for a place to build a fort. They spot a white PVC pipe sticking out of the ground at an odd angle. Pull it out, heavy. Unscrew the cap. Inside, wrapped in plastic, are 5 firearms, 500 rounds of ammunition, 8 Halloween masks, detailed maps of bank locations, and meticulously handwritten plans for robberies. Another Tuesday afternoon discovery for suburban teenagers. The kind of thing that makes you reconsider your weekend plans for exploring the local forest. That pipe belonged to Carl Gugassian. Finding it ended a criminal career that had run undetected since 1973. Over 50 banks robbed across the eastern United States. More than $2 million stolen. The FBI had investigated these connected robberies for decades and couldn't make progress. Every lead went nowhere. Every pattern analysis hit a wall. Then 2 kids on spring break stumbled over a piece of plumbing, and the entire operation collapsed overnight. Carl wasn't some desperate guy who needed cash. He was an electrical engineer, had a legitimate job, made decent money, paid his mortgage in Pennsylvania, normal neighbor who kept his lawn maintained. The guy you'd ask to watch your house when you went on vacation. Except he'd been moonlighting as a bank robber since the early 70s. Army Special Forces veteran who combined military tactics with engineering precision to approach bank robbery like optimizing a manufacturing process. Your tax dollars trained him to do this with exceptional efficiency. They called him the Friday night bank robber. He'd hit small-town banks right before closing on Fridays, walk in, vault the counter in one smooth motion, take the cash, give clear instructions to staff, and exit in under 90 seconds. Then drive a stolen car to a predetermined forest location, abandon the vehicle, and vanish into trees like he'd never existed. By the time police arrived, he was miles away, moving through terrain he'd scouted weeks earlier. Local cops would find the abandoned car near a tree line, and that was it. Search dogs lost his scent almost immediately because he used deer hunting spray. The FBI's entire investigative arsenal couldn't touch this guy for 3 decades. Then teenagers found his supplies, because PVC pipes look interesting when you're bored. His preparation system was what made investigators sick when they finally learned about it. 18 secret caches buried in forests across Pennsylvania, Maryland, and West Virginia. 18 separate PVC pipes containing weapons, ammunition, masks, detailed hand-drawn maps, and written plans for specific banks. He'd scout an area for months, identify potential targets, create multiple escape routes, then bury everything he'd need along those routes. Each cache took weeks to prepare, each location chosen for maximum concealment and accessibility. The man took his criminal hobby more seriously than most people take their actual careers. It was like setting up video game save points except for felonies. What drove the FBI crazy was the time gaps between robberies. He didn't hit banks constantly. Sometimes 6 months would pass, sometimes over a year. Normal criminals can't do that. They need money consistently, so they commit crimes consistently, which creates patterns you can predict. Carl would rob a bank, take maybe $30,000, then go back to his engineering job, live on his salary, wait until he felt like doing another job, then activate one of his supply caches and do it again. The randomness was strategic. No pattern meant no way to anticipate his next move. Investigators were always looking at crimes that already happened, finding nothing useful. Every robbery he wore a different Halloween mask, purchased from a different store. Witnesses would describe a werewolf, or a gorilla, or a vampire to police sketch artists. Sounds specific, until you realize that description matches 47,000 masks sold in every Halloween store across America. Police couldn't narrow down where he bought them, because he probably purchased 1 mask per year, from different retailers in different states over decades. Since they were such common items, there was no way to trace purchases. Trying to track someone by their Halloween costume acquisitions might as well search for people who buy ballpoint pens. The FBI had thick files by the late 90s, same technique across all robberies. Composite sketches of masks, which helped nobody. Ballistic evidence from firearms he'd purchased legally years before with proper paperwork. Stolen cars taken from long-term airport parking lots, where owners wouldn't notice for days, giving him maximum time to operate before anyone reported a vehicle missing. Everything technically legal until the exact moment he vaulted that bank counter. The attention to detail was stunning when you consider what he could have accomplished applying this focus to literally anything legal. He kept working his engineering job between robberies, showing up every day, being completely unremarkable. Co-workers had no idea. Neighbors had no idea. Apparently even his family had no idea. The compartmentalization required to keep these 2 lives separate for 3 decades is psychologically fascinating in a deeply concerning way. Most criminals get caught because they can't resist showing off their success. Carl treated robbing banks like a hobby he kept in the garage and never mentioned at dinner parties. Very mature approach to operational security. His discipline extended to the money. No sudden expensive purchases, No lifestyle changes that would raise eyebrows. No bragging to anyone about anything. The stolen cash just disappeared into his life quietly, supplementing his income like he had a profitable side business. Which he did, technically. The most illegal side hustle in Pennsylvania. But from the outside, you'd never know. Just a regular engineer who went to work, came home, maybe robbed a bank on Friday evening, then watched TV like everyone else. Then April 2001 happened. 3 decades of military-grade operational planning, hundreds of hours of reconnaissance, 18 hidden caches, millions in stolen cash, 0 investigative mistakes, and 2 teenagers pulled a pipe out of the ground because it looked weird, and they had nothing better to do. Inside that specific cache was a karate studio brochure. Carl had been taking martial arts classes to stay in shape. Picked up a promotional flyer, stuffed it in the pipe with his robbery supplies without thinking about it. The brochure had his fingerprints. Those fingerprints matched prints in the FBI database from his military service decades earlier. Suddenly they had a name. Carl Gugassian, electrical engineer from Pennsylvania, Army veteran. And now, officially, the Friday night bank robber they'd been hunting since the 70s, the same person who'd made them look completely helpless for 30 years, got identified because he couldn't be bothered to wipe down a piece of paper advertising karate lessons. All that meticulous preparation, all that tactical awareness, defeated by a brochure. They arrested him in 2002 at his house, with overwhelming evidence. He looked at what they had, did the math like the engineer he was, and cooperated fully. Told them everything. Showed them where the other 17 caches were buried. Walked them through his entire methodology. Explained every single robbery in detail. Gave them information they couldn't have obtained any other way. It wasn't remorse. It was calculation. The initial charges could have resulted in 115 years in prison. With full cooperation, his lawyer negotiated it down to 17 years. He served his time quietly, got released, and as far as anyone knows, went back to being a completely normal person, without the weekend bank robbery hobby. The 2 boys who found the cash received nothing. No reward money, no recognition. They did their civic duty, turned the evidence over to police, and went back to being regular teenagers. Which seems remarkably unfair when you think about it. They accidentally solved a 30-year federal case and got 0 compensation except a good story to tell at parties for the rest of their lives. The FBI got closure on 50-plus unsolved robberies spanning 3 decades. Carl got 17 years in prison, then his freedom. The boys got to say they once found a PVC pipe full of crime supplies in the Pennsylvania woods. That's the reward structure we're working with here. The case study is taught in criminal justice courses now. Not as a warning that crime doesn't pay, because it clearly paid extremely well for 3 decades, but as an example of how even the most careful criminals eventually get caught by random chance. Carl executed his plan without errors. The reconnaissance was thorough. The operational security was airtight. He never made a mistake that investigators could exploit. What caught him was something completely outside his control. Random chance in the form of 2 curious teenagers taking a different route home from school, finding something that looked interesting, being bored enough to investigate. You can't plan for that. You can't defend against random luck deciding it's your turn, which is either reassuring or terrifying depending on your perspective. Reassuring if you worry about criminal masterminds being unstoppable, because apparently even the most disciplined eventually lose to pure chance. Terrifying if you're realizing that 3 decades of successful crime is completely achievable with military training, engineering skills, and patience. Carl proved the concept works, proved that you can beat every investigative technique law enforcement has if you're careful enough and never tell anyone. The only reason we know about him is luck. A PVC pipe visible from the right angle. 2 kids with free time and curiosity. 4 feet to the left and they walk right past it. Carl keeps operating. Maybe another decade, maybe forever. Everything hung on that single random moment. The most sophisticated bank robbery career in American history collapsed because teenagers are curious, and white pipes stand out against dirt in Pennsylvania forests. The FBI probably has nightmares about this. About how many other Carl Gugassians might be out there right now. People with his skill set who haven't been caught yet, who don't keep karate brochures in their supply caches, who bury their pipes 3 feet deeper where kids won't find them. Because if you can do it for 3 decades, you can probably do it for 4 or 5. All it takes is not getting randomly discovered by teenagers looking for fort-building materials. Sleep tight.